Okay, well, good evening, everybody, and thanks very much for coming along. I appreciate that. I'm Ian Lambert. I'm going to be giving you a talk on AI, a little bit about ChatGPT, and how that relates to something called intellectual property. And I'll be explaining a bit more about intellectual property as I go. And feel free, please, to put your hand up and ask any questions during the course of this talk. That's absolutely fine. And then we can also sort of wrap it up at the end with a question and answer session as well. So, a little bit about the structure of the talk, a little bit about me, a little bit about my firm, which is a firm called Wynne-Jones IP. As you've probably guessed, IP is an acronym of intellectual property. A little bit about AI, a little bit about ChatGPT, and then a question which we get asked more and more, in fact, which is who actually owns some work product or something that's been produced by AI, and that's a really active and hot topic. And a subset of that, I suppose, is the question, can AI ever be an inventor or a creator of something in a legal sense? And then I'll talk about a little bit about infringement, what that means, and things like liability, scary stuff like that. A little bit about enforcement of IP, and then a few sort of key takeaways from the talk, and then some practical hints and tips as well to wrap it up, and then we'll have a little Q&A session at the end. So, a little bit about me. I'm Dr Ian Lambert. I'm a director, part owner and patent attorney at Wynne-Jones IP. I am a doctor, but I can't actually cure you or anything. I could probably make it worse for you. I could probably kill you, actually. But in fact, I got a doctorate in chemical physics, which is pretty interesting stuff. It means I'm actually sort of technically competent to handle patents in a wide range of areas, actually. So things like nanotechnology and semiconductors, things like that, laser technology, photonics, that sort of stuff. So when I was doing the PhD, actually, back in the Middle Ages, I did actually do a little bit of programming, archaic stuff, how the world's moved on. And the world's really moved on, I'd say, in the last 10 years or so, and that's given rise to this enormous development in AI, which is, of course, going to be the subject of the talk this evening. I'm a UK and European patent attorney, also a European design attorney, actually, as well. As I mentioned, I handle quite a wide range of technology, and thanks to our marketing manager who put this slide together, to mentioning that I'm also an increasingly ageing club cyclist for a local club, Evesham. So that's a little bit about me. So as I said, this talks about intellectual property, so I thought perhaps I'll throw it back at you and say, can you give me some examples of intellectual property, of individual areas of intellectual property? Just shout them out, and I've given you two pretty massive clues already. Trademarks, thank you. Yes, that's a big one. Yes, trademarks, yes. Software. So software is something which can be actually protected via a number of IP rights, of which trademarks can be an example. Copyright. Very important. And software is a good example. Software is protectable by copyright. Come on, guys, I gave you a clue. Patents. Patents, yes. Patents, another big area, a huge area, actually, and also very applicable to, I say very applicable in certain ways to computer-related inventions in general, and also to AI, but not with a wholesale applicability. That's another hot topic in IP, actually, how patents can be applied to things like AI and computer inventions. And the other massive clue I gave you, by the way, is designs. So actually designs is an area of intellectual property. So, and there are other areas as well, actually, and allied areas, like trade secrets, actually. Generally, technically it's not IP right, but it kind of falls under the umbrella. And there are things like database rights as well, which actually can be very important, of course, with software because, you know, databases and you know, big data and everything. So database rights, there are the slightly esoteric rights as well. But these all fall under the ambit of intellectual property rights. And the reason they're called intellectual property is because they are just that. They are actually, in law, they are a property right, but they're to protect things that come out of the human brain, essentially, human ingenuity, human creativity. So that obviously makes you think, well, what the hell do you do when the idea hasn't come out of the human brain, it's come out of a machine? What do we do then? So that's part of the reason for having this talk. So, yeah, a little bit more about us, if you don't mind the blatant sales plug. So we are intellectual property specialists. That's basically all we do. We're what's called an IP boutique firm. We're based locally. We're based in Cheltenham and Gloucester is where we started. We have an office in Malvern, actually. We have a big interest in South Wales, in Cardiff. We have an office in London, and actually we have a little tiny, not really manned office in Telford as well. So we cover, you know, quite a spread in terms of area. But we are what I call a full spectrum IP firm in the sense that we will handle all areas of IP. So the things I've just been prodding you about, patents, trademarks, designs, either registered or unregistered, copyright, database rights, trade secrets, these sort of things. This is our sort of stock in trade. We are patent and trademark attorneys primarily in the sense that that's probably where most of our day-to-day business lies, and that's generally true, I think, probably in IP, but also these other areas as well. And really, it's the interaction of them all. It's how you deal with them all together. That's the important thing. We're a UK firm. We try to be quite progressive in what we do, and one part of that is that we actually part own a European IP firm, which is called Apex BV. It's BV because it's set up, it has its seat in Holland. And we're co-owners of that with some other European firms. And that gives us an absolutely superb plug into Europe, actually. Within our organisation, there are actually over 500 professionals and over 200 attorneys, all with different perspectives, depending on different countries that they're in. So we have a huge reach across Europe. We actually have a reach across the world. We have a sort of network of firms that we know across the world, and we're regularly travelling across the world. So, and this is very important because the world's a more globalised place now, and IP certainly is as well. So it's important to know what's happening, not just in your own country, but globally as well. And we work with some cool clients, and we work for clients right across the whole spectrum. So the individual person, the individual inventor has got a bright idea. SMEs, universities, university spin-outs, up to large firms, up to multinationals and sort of household names. We do some work for Louis Vuitton, for example. And one I'll just mention, actually, SPTS down there at the bottom, was one of my clients, is a semiconductor client, absolutely fantastic firm, wonderful firm, have everything worked out superbly well. They basically make the machines that make the chips that go into almost every mobile phone in the world, for example. So really wonderful technology that's actually invented and manufactured in South Wales. Right, so what is AI? So this is something, there's some things there that AI may or may not do, actually, recognise patterns, make decisions, think like a human. The last one is a real hot topic. AI is something which has actually been around for a rather long time, in fact. In fact, the term was first coined in 1955. Credit generally being given to Professor John McCarthy of Stanford University, although I think others were probably involved as well. And so it's been going a long time. And I mean, I got some personal experience of that. So an example of AI is neural networks. And I can recall working on some neural network patents in the mid-90s, for example. And neural networks were well known, you know, by then. First developed earlier than that. So I think it's fair to say it's the last sort of 10, 15 years where things have really snowballed in the area of AI. We've really seen rapid developments. In general, I think AI can be sort of categorized into three subcategories. There's narrow AI, also known as weak AI. There's general AI, which I think is also known as strong AI, and there's super AI. So narrow AI is, if you like, a more limited sort of, that's a relative term, a more limited form. It's sort of performing discrete functions, for example. So things like, but very powerful things like, Siri, Alexa, those sort of things are an example of narrow AI. General AI is something that's much more powerful, something that is essentially on a par with the human intellect and can perform many operations and do many things and problem solve. And super AI is where it possibly gets a bit scary, and you have software and computers that actually their capability well exceeds that of a human, pretty much across the board essentially, and maybe many times exceed what a human can do. As a matter of interest, where do you think ChatGPT fits into that?
Narrow.
Yeah, it's narrow. That's right. It's really exploded more recently, and we're already seeing sort of wondrous things that can be done. Drug development, drug targets being identified. Sort of stuff being done with a matter of months that would take 10 years otherwise. Breast cancer diagnoses, these sort of things. I read an article about an app where a smartphone can detect your pattern of usage of the smartphone and detect early onset dementia from that. So extraordinary, essentially infinite range of things that might be done.
What sort of platforms would you require for each of those categories, subcategory of AI? What do you need to run it on?
At this point, I give a caveat. I'm an IP expert, I'm not an AI expert. So that sort of level of detail, probably best not to ask me. We do have others in the firm who actually are experts on AI, but unfortunately you got me tonight, so I'm afraid it's the narrow IP you got tonight from me. So I couldn't answer that one. Machine learning is very important in narrow AI. That's an example of sort of techniques which are applied in narrow AI, things like neural networks, deep learning as well, something which involves a number of layers in the network. And of course this gives rise to both benefits and concerns. And again, I'll throw it open to you guys. Can you give me some examples of where you see perceived benefits from AI?
What I can see benefits is when you do a presentation, like the pitch deck.
You're using AI, not me.
Yeah. I use AI, but the problem by AI, it's not a problem, but it's a benefit. Because you know your business, and some things that AI doesn't know your business, but it can just make it more perfect. And then maybe sometimes you can do a presentation 2 hours or 3, and sometimes it can take me like maybe a week to do that presentation. That's what I see. It's really good.
Yeah.
So I started to work, so I started using AI in May this year. So the things that I did from May till now, it's crazy. It's like I did a lot of stuff which I probably couldn't do maybe in a week.
Yeah.
So that's what I see as the benefit.
Yeah. Making life easier for you.
About the other concerns, I don't know yet.
Yeah, I use it as a creative tool. So I use it to produce the first stage of images or media or whatever. And then I use those as a base thing, like collecting collage images or whatever. So I use that, and then I can layer my work on top of it, sort of thing. So that's a benefit. The worrying thing is if I release my work out there, do people just use that to retrain? So someone could skip the step that I've done, so it can be replacing me. Not as much as, say, my accountant who's really worried because he's going to be the first to go, isn't he?
I hope so. Yeah. I'm hoping patent attorneys will be amongst the last ones.
I use it as a creative tool. It's a very creative tool if you control it, because I can use it to draw a person's face, or say draw, or do some royal family things. So I can use it to draw the king, which is interesting because AI doesn't know what the king looks like, but it does know what a photo of the king looks like.
Yeah.
So it goes completely nuts when it tries to draw him. So I use that. I use it inadequacies as the artwork.
Okay.
So I treat both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. Concerns. People's
Right.
concerns.
I think when it comes to plagiarism as well, AI might not be able to recognize if it's someone else's work. And you might ask it a question, and it's just play someone else's work, and you might think, oh, it is original, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll come on to that actually in a few slides' time. Yeah, yeah. Okay. You're not concerned about killer robots then or anything like that? Okay. Right. So, I'm not expecting you to read all this, but this is the open letter that was published, I think, in March this year by a number of fairly august people in the field, including experts at Apple and Meta, and also, love him or loathe him, Elon Musk as well, warning about possible risks with AI. So it starts off with AI systems with human competitive intelligence can pose profound risks to society and humanity. Advanced AI could represent a profound change in the history of life on Earth and should be planned for and managed with commensurate care and resources. And so it goes on. So there are both benefits and concerns, of course. So it does look like politicians are actually turning some attention to this and the fact that there are risks and concerns and unfavourable scenarios. So Rishi Sunak and the government organised the seminar recently at Bletchley. And then very recently, actually, I think within the last week, the EU have agreed in principle to produce regulations on AI, comprehensive rules for trustworthy AI, which includes some areas that are set out there. So, for example, bans on sort of broad-based use of facial recognition to compile databases, those sort of things. Now, right, ChatGPT. So, well, I'll just actually read out the first part of this. What is it? This is the answer. ChatGPT is a language model developed by OpenAI, been in the news a lot recently, based on the GPT 3.5 architecture. It is designed to generate human-like text based on the input it receives. ChatGPT can understand and generate text in natural language, making it suitable for a wide range of natural language processing tasks, including answering questions, generating text, providing explanations, and engaging in conversation. ChatGPT is trained on a diverse data set that includes a wide variety of text from the internet. Oh yes. And it can generate coherent and contextually relevant responses to a wide range of prompts, although not always. So, we've all heard about and almost certainly used. Has everybody used ChatGPT, by the way? Is there anyone who hasn't? Yeah. Okay. There are a number of things to say, particularly from an intellectual property point of view, about ChatGPT. So it's trained on data from the internet. Oh, didn't mean to do that. There we go. Oh, that's okay. Let's keep that there. That's fine. It's trained on data from the internet. And incidentally, I think the training data is about 2 years or more out of date. So you're not necessarily getting up-to-date output from it.
The Queen was alive.
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's an example of generative AI. So it can make stuff up. It's great at making stuff up. But stuff may not be accurate in the slightest. So that's something to consider, of course. Also, if you use something like ChatGPT, what you put into it is used as part of training, and so there's an issue of confidentiality there, which I failed to mention earlier, but actually confidentiality is generally regarded as falling within the sort of broad umbrella of IP, intellectual property. So that's something to be very careful about, actually, that you may be giving away proprietary information just by using ChatGPT. And another thing, falling very squarely in my sort of area of intellectual property rights, is that ChatGPT may infringe on others' intellectual property rights, such as copyright, actually, although in principle some other rights as well. In fact, that was a sufficient concern that a guy called Ed Newton-Rex, who is at the UK company Stability AI, recently quit his job over that, actually, in view of the unauthorised use of internet material, and I'll come on to that in a minute. So, and another thing, actually, in the legal profession, you might well have heard about quite famously, was a US lawyer used ChatGPT to write a brief, and they produced a brief, okay, with some lovely-looking case law cited that was all completely fictitious. So, I mean, your comment about the accountant, I mean, obviously, you know, there's worry in my profession as well. But I think
The lawyer lost his job, didn't he?
he
Lost his license.
Well, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right. No, obviously, we're all concerned in professional services that AI is going to come along and do our jobs for us, and possibly will in the future. It's at the moment there are programs that claim to be able to draft patents that are already out there. I mean, I don't think we're out of a job at the moment. I think we're in the regime that you mentioned, I think, about it helping you and actually making you do stuff quicker, which is a favourable regime to be in. But if it moves into the next regime where it's doing it all for me, then I get very worried.
And then even you can analyze a document in detail, like kind of maybe an accounting or calculation.
You're absolutely right.
And then he said it's right because of this, because of that.
Yeah.
It's wrong.
Yeah, it's great. Actually, it's great for analysing documents. So it's good for analysing patent documents, actually, as well. Yeah. That's absolutely right. There is every possibility that the copyright infringement could be involved. And that actually, to give you a little bit of background about copyright, that can be quite a dubious area. I mean, there are various forms of copyright infringement. There are defences against copyright infringement, such as that it was for fair use, for example. You have to have copied a substantial part of a work for it to be copyright infringement. But basically, it's getting into fairly murky water. And let me step back, and because I've got it on here and I couldn't remember it, what you're signing up to when you use ChatGPT, there is a massive limitation of liability on their behalf. So it reads, neither we nor any of our affiliates or licensors will be liable for any indirect, incidental, special consequential or exemplary damages, including damages for loss of profits, goodwill, blah, 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 use, data, other losses. Even if we have been advised of the possibility of such damages, so even if they knew this was on the cards, our aggregate liability under these terms will not exceed the greater of the amount you paid for the service that gave rise to the claim, in other words, what you pay for ChatGPT, during the 12 months before the liability arose, or $100. So, you know, they're not going to go out of business if there's copyright infringement. The limitations in this section apply only to the maximum extent permitted by applicable law. So basically, they're trying to put it on you, the user. And you also, just to really put the cream on top, the cherry on top of the cake, you also agree to indemnify them. So it actually says, if you were a business or organisation, to the extent permitted by law, you will indemnify and hold harmless us, that's the ChatGPT guys, our affiliates and our personnel, from and against any costs, losses, liabilities and expenses, including attorney's fees, so it's everything, from third-party claims arising out of or relating to your use of ChatGPT services. So that's things like copyright claims. So again, to give you a slightly sort of rambling and sort of potty review of copyright, what might happen if somebody thinks you're infringing a copyright or any other intellectual property rights is that you might receive something that the Law Society would call a letter before action, and we call a nastygram. So it's basically a very scary looking letter on official letterheading from a law firm or an IP firm such as us, explaining that you're absolutely bang to rights and you're infringing somebody's IP rights, maybe more than one of them, and that you owe them a lot of money. And it's generally there to, obviously called a nasty ground for obvious reasons. It's there to scare the hell out of you. So, and if that should happen, I would highly advise coming to see somebody like me about it, to see what sort of position you are in.
Is it very costly if you do that? Does it depend on who the person is and what you've used? Can you just say, I'm really sorry?
Well,
I mean, you know,
sometimes you can.
how much
Sometimes you can. At the end of the day,
and then you take
yeah.
it down and you remove what you've used? Or does it depend on how far it's travelled?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It is a case-by-case basis, and you can guarantee that obviously the nasty grams written by the representatives of the third party, and you know, who are charging lots of money, so they're going to make it as scary as possible and tell you that, you know, they want the blood of your firstborn, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's if it's settled out of court, and actually in the UK most matters are settled out of court. At the end of the day, it's an agreement. It's a negotiation in part. It depends who wants what.
Yeah, if you personally use something and you don't have any money, and you haven't made any money from the use of the item, that must be quite difficult to force you to pay it back if you just don't have it.
That's right. I mean, they need to have suffered damage, and they need to explain what that damage is, and for it to be sensibly quantified. So I'm not recommending anybody to fly in the face of IP rights at all. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you know, you're not necessarily going to have to sort of pay $1 million in damages or something. It depends on the reality and the actuality of the situation.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
I was going to say the same thing. I just wondered, because like Hugo Boss, renowned, aren't they, for going after people who accidentally use part of their name, sort of thing. So, but they don't really want money. So I presume is that most companies just want you to back down.
Yes,
if you haven't made money out of it.
If you have made money out of it, yeah, they're trying to squash it. Yeah, but that means, so Hugo Boss, like all big fashion, the brand is everything. And, and so trademarks protect brands. So you'd probably get a nasty gram alleging trademark infringement, and they will be sending lots of these letters out. And the primary, I think it's fair to say, particularly if you really haven't done anything, the primary thing they want is to clear you out of the way, and make sure they've got this field to themselves.
Makes it look bad, and I could be done, or argued copyright, but I'll just back down.
Yeah, I mean, it's where people have gone ahead and there are two dangerous situations where people have gone ahead and actually made a lot of money and taken market share off the rights holder. Then they've suffered probably quantifiable material damage, and they might come after you.
I'm more interested just making them look bad to start with.
Yeah. But the other thing that can really cost you is if you've spent a lot of time and effort and money, setting up a brand. Maybe that's your company name, and you've got a premises or something. And then you find that you're actually infringing, or you're alleged to infringe somebody's copyright or trademark, most likely. And if you have to sort of rebrand, then that can be very expensive for you. And I've seen that happen as well. So quite a few horror stories there. So I'm digressing massively, but it's still about IP, and it's good, sensible, general advice. So things like trademark searches are very important if you're looking at setting up a brand or setting up a business. Just because you can register a name at company's house doesn't mean you're free of infringement. That's not a freedom to operate search, being able to have a name at company's house. So you do need to think about trademarks. Back to AI. Yeah, so Rex at Stability AI resigned, and I don't know whether that's directly related to this or not, but they have been very recently sued by Getty Images, and I think there's been action in the US, and there's also an action in the UK actually, which is ongoing, and the allegation really is precisely what I was talking about earlier, that Stability AI basically sort of scrape images from the internet, and the allegation is that they've scraped something like 12 million plus copyright images that are owned by Getty Images, and they've done that without paying the license that Getty Images use as a business model for use of their of their images. So that is a current court case. I couldn't tell you which way it's going to go. That image, by the way, is an image generated using Stability AI's technology. The astronaut on a horse. So this is a question, as I said, which is really becoming a hot topic. We get asked it all the time. Who owns AI-produced work? So a little bit about things like copyright in general. The starting point with copyright is that the owner is the creator of the work. If you're employed and it's part of your usual job description to create things, then the employer would ordinarily become the owner in the copyright. There are other instances. So, for example, what happens at universities, and that very much depends on the university. So it's quite common, I'd say it's the norm for universities to have conditions that they will own IP. This might be patent rights, for example, if you're doing a PhD in a technical area, for example. The rights will be owned by the university at sort of PhD level and postdoctorate level. Oxford University's policy is that they would own IP rights apart from copyright from their students. But other universities will have different approaches to that. Commission is one to look out for, actually, because of the principle that the owner, at least in the first instance, is the creator. If you commission somebody to do something, take a photograph, for example, the classic example is the wedding photographer, then in the first instance, it's the wedding photographer who would own the copyright there, not the commissioner. So the motto actually with copyright, and actually all other intellectual property rights, is to make sure that the ownership is really well established. And if there's any doubt, then assignments are very important because, as I mentioned, IP, intellectual property, is an example of a legal property right. It is actually a thing in law. Was there a question coming in there?
No, there was a case recently in America where an artist tried to copyright his work that was done completely on AI. He just, you have to work it.
Shush, I'm going to come to that.
Okay.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. Yes, absolutely right.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I'll come to that. Yeah, so I was just talking generally about sort of copyright and ownership in general. This is really, so you see, I'm veering off from AI into a little bit of general stuff on IP, but hopefully will be useful.
One from photography, image rights of people's faces in sports, massive amounts of money
Yes.
are being charged or exchanging hands because of footballers and their faces.
Indeed. Yes, that's right. Yeah. And then you find things like trademarks, the CR7, that sort of thing, all comes into it as well. Essentially you're increasing the value of a brand at the end of the day. Yeah, absolutely right.
Yes, the value of the brand is where the
Yes.
football star is. Nobody bothered about League 1 or 2, but
Yeah.
the Premier League or Champions League, of course, people are very, very bothered about.
Yes, exactly, yeah. So something that actually crops up all the time, and often it crops up, right at the end when deals are being done and people look into sales that involve IP rights, and maybe the IP rights are a big part of the value that's being sold, and actually somebody says, well, who actually owns this? And they look at the chain of title, we call it, and in fact, the person who thought they owned it didn't actually own it. So ownership is really important, and assignments, and because IP is actually a legal right, it is something that can be assigned. It can be bought and sold. It can be assigned. It can be mortgaged, actually. Do all sorts of things with it. So assignment is very important. So that's actually, again, sort of veering off from AI, but that's actually quite an important take-home for you if you get involved in IP rights, that ownership and properly recording assignments of rights can be a very important thing to do indeed, critically important. Yeah, so, but circling back to AI, with patents, what happens is on a patent, you will have one or more persons named as an inventor. Now, they may not own the patent, so you've got this similar idea about to copyright with a creator, but the creator may not actually be the owner. It could be, say, the creator's employer, for example. Very similar thing in patents. You will have inventors, but you need to have inventors, because that's what a patent is. It covers an invention, so there needs to be an inventor. And there'll be an owner who may or may not be the inventor. So, gives rise to an obvious question, doesn't it? If a patent relates to an invention that's being produced ultimately by a piece of AI, who's the inventor? Who's the inventor? Can the AI software be the inventor? That's a question. There's an allied question in copyright. So, can AI ever be an author or a creator? That's an allied question. And similarly with designs, can AI ever be a designer? And this is a hell of a problem in IP. So in the US, for example, all the relevant statutes, all the relevant law written long before this ever became an issue, and it's unequivocal that it has to be a human. You know, the creator, the designer, the inventor has to be a human being. It's there in law. It's written down in the statute. Interestingly, in the UK, we actually had a Copyright Act, which also includes designs, which came out in 1988. And by that time, of course, the general idea of computers assisting in some way was out there. And the actual legal act, the UK Act, was written in a sort of appropriate way. So it actually says, in the case of a literary, dramatic, musical, or artistic work which is computer generated, the author shall be taken to be the person by whom the arrangements necessary for the creation of the work are undertaken. So that's in respect of copyright. It's got a similar sort of condition in respect of designs as well. But our Patent Act, which was written 10 years earlier, doesn't have anything like that. So I can't actually provide you with an answer. This is the real hot topic. So I've forgotten what the next slide says, whether it's relevant to this. No, it's not relevant to this. So I'll carry on talking over this slide. It is the subject of quite a lot of court cases, as you might imagine, all around the world. So there's a guy called Stephen Thaler, who is an AI expert, and he has produced some software called Dabus, I think it's called, D-A-B-U-S, and he has been filing patent applications alleging that Dabus is the inventor. So he's pushing test cases, basically, and it's been rejected everywhere, as far as I know. And it includes cases in the UK, and in the UK it's going right up the legal tree. So it started off at court, went to the Court of Appeal, it's been rejected every step of the way. It's now gone to the Supreme Court, actually. So this is serious business, Supreme Court. You know, this is tell the government what to do with Rwanda and such like. So it's the highest legal court in the land. So what it produces is truly binding. And it's been considering the matter. It took hearings earlier in the year, and I think the decision is coming out later this month, actually. So we'll see what it says. I would be surprised if it overturned the earlier decisions, but it's the Supreme Court. They can do what they want. So we'll see what the result is. But as I say, similar rejections elsewhere. So at the moment it's hard to see how AI could be named as an inventor on patents. In terms of copyright, Dr. Thaler has done a similar thing and generated a rather beautiful piece of artwork using AI, which he then applied for a copyright registration in the US, because you can do that in the US. You actually apply to get your copyright registered, not something that happens in the UK. And that got rejected, as he knew it would happen, unequivocally, because the relevant law in the US says it has to be a human who created it or designed it. So that's now going to appeal. So that's going to be heard out by the courts. So the answer, I'm afraid, is unsatisfactory. I can't give you a definitive answer. The way it's pointing at the moment is against AI being able to be registered as a creator or inventor or designer. But we're really at the early stages, I think, and what's absolutely clear is that legal case law is going to develop, I think, over the years. So I think it's watch this space for what the answer is going to be. So, well, some tips. Hopefully they're practical and some takeaways. I mean, I think we all know AI is here to stay. We need to make our peace with that in whatever way would be to best advantage to us in our lives and in our businesses as well. And we've spoken about, and I agree with what you said actually about it, using it to make your life easier. I've mentioned the different types of AI. I've discussed ChatGPT and some of the downsides associated with it. So a little bit of sort of Job's comforter from me, really, sort of a few warnings about some of the possibly unintended consequences of using it. And finally, a little bit about enforcement, because I've spoken about that, and to possibly head off the question that's probably going down at me if I didn't mention this, about enforcement. Because there's a perception, which I wouldn't say is wholly wrong, that enforcement is very, very expensive, and IP is just not for me. I wouldn't wholly disagree with the first proposition, but I would not agree with the second proposition that IP should not be for you. Practically every business will have IP. Actually, practically every business will have a trademark or some name or brand or whatever, logo, whatever, that could be not just protected but could add value to your business through trademarks. And there's the other areas of IP that I mentioned. So the question comes up, well, what happens about enforcement? Is this just a big boys game? Is it too expensive? Now, I won't hide the fact that going all the way to court is expensive, although there's in the UK now, there's a less expensive court, which is a lot less expensive, so it's more accessible than it ever was. But what I would say is only a very small percentage of cases ever go to court in the UK. Most are settled out of court. And in general, I would say, whilst perhaps there can be some rogues, in general, businesses are respecters, and particularly big businesses, ultimately, are respecters of IP. And the tables can be turned and you can send your own nasty grams out to people. That's relatively inexpensive. And very frequently that will result in some sort of compromise and some sort of agreement and settlement being made. So that's the old chestnut about enforcement being expensive. That's my take on it. I mean, it's not that it's untruthful. Ultimately, to go to court can be very expensive, but that's not the whole story. And sensible enforcement is possible, and we do that all the time for our smaller clients at Wynne-Jones. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming and listening to me, and also for engaging with me during the course of that talk. By the way, that's a computer AI-generated image. I'm not sure I'm entirely happy with it, but I'm happier than I was with some of the other images that had sort of 6 fingers and maybe look 15 years older. But yeah, for what it's worth, that's an AI image. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, further questions, please shout out.
I was going to say, on a wide level, the condition of being a human being is being human, essentially. Do you think that as the march of this progresses, that it will encourage people to be more naturally lazy with their engagements?
Well, that's kind of above my pay grade. I could speculate naively. You could say that maybe that's the way tech's made us go in general, and so why would this be any different? I think it's going to change things quite profoundly. Exactly how, I think it's hard to say. I mean, there are lots. I've read stuff from various futurologists about how things might go. I think what also makes it difficult to predict, I think, is the pace of change, because the pace of change is so quick that things happen so quickly and take you off in different directions. So, which is a long-winded way of saying I don't think I'm going to answer that question. Thank you very much. I'll sidestep it. Was there? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got 2 questions. The first is,
So we kind of touched on how the use of AI is basically streamlining some processes, cutting down time. I went to another talk that touched on AI and IP, and they focused a lot on how something like patent drafting is something that could be reduced massively, or like the time spent on patent drafting could be reduced by use of AI.
Yeah.
Do you think that means that AI is going to sort of catalyse a change in the way that IP firms train trainees? And if there's, I guess, if you see patent drafting as like one sort of job for a patent attorney, if that can be reduced, that there's going to be a shift in sort of the importance of different jobs of a patent attorney, if that makes sense.
That's an excellent question. And are you a patent attorney, by the way?
No.
Do you want to be a patent attorney?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I thought. Yeah. No, I have. Yeah. I have no doubt that what you said is right. And so there's already commercial software out there, AI-based software for patent drafting, and I don't think at the moment it's going to be drafting like the patent claims, which is the real beating heart of a patent, is the patent claim. That defines your invention. And incidentally, it has to define your invention in one sentence. It may be a very long sentence, it usually is, but it's one sentence. And that's kind of where the real skill, if I may say so, comes into it. Already, I think AI is good enough that it can then actually facilitate the other parts of the document that is a patent specification. So, it can write other sections. I think the jury's out as to how advisable it is. As with everything else, there are early adopters who are using this already, and there are, as I said, there's commercial software out there. But it's undoubtedly going to affect, in a very short time, the profession. And, I think for a guy like me, at my end of my career, at this moment in time, it works in the sense that, going back to the point we talked about earlier, it will make my life easier. I'll be able to draft patent specifications more quickly. That then segues back to somebody like you, wanting to be a trainee. I think that could affect trainees very much, because the classic way in which trainees are taught at patent firms, I'm sorry if it's boring the rest of you, don't bore the hell out of you, but the classic way trainees are taught at patent firms is for the senior guy or girl to write the claims, give it to the trainee and say, right, knock the rest of it up. Now, if you can just give it to the AI program, knock the rest of it up, that clearly has some potential consequences. So, I don't know the answer to that. I don't think anybody actually really does know the answer to that, because I think things are happening so quickly, it's hard to predict which way it goes. My gut feel is that I think it will have an effect, but I don't think it's going to mean there'll be no more trainees until the last old guy or girl keels over. And then we think, oh, we've got no patent agents left, we should have trained somebody. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it could affect the numbers going into the profession. But there are other factors around IP in any case. So, everything is always in a constant state of flux. This is just one more factor that means we're in a state of flux. So, I definitely wouldn't disabuse you of the idea of going into IP and patents, because I think it's a fantastic profession, actually. For the right person in particular, it's a fantastic profession, and I think it will remain that way for the foreseeable.
Have you ever used ChatGPT to try and find the holes in your patents?
Now, I'm very much on the sceptical side here. I don't want to really go anywhere near ChatGPT because of the confidentiality issues over it.
I just wondered if you tried to find the holes and then tried to fill those holes with ChatGPT and you'd end up running a big circle.
Well, the first thing, obviously, there are no holes ever in any patent I ever draft. That's the first thing to say. But the second thing is I'm worried about confidentiality, because I would be scared that I'm letting confidential information out into the jaws of ChatGPT. Now, the commercial solutions have addressed the confidentiality issue to a greater or lesser extent, but I'm still nervous. I'm not an early adopter. I think I'll perhaps let others go in there first. Was there another related questions.
I was just going to add on to the gentleman when he was talking about. I think what it's going to do, I think it's an added resource and a tool, and I think it's just going to improve your job. And as the gentleman said, it's going to make you more efficient, time efficient. It's the same with phone technology, because now on the device we're taking pictures, sending emails, scanning it, doing a lot of things. So I think it's more of a resource than it is. And as the gentleman said something about loopholes, ChatGPT, I'll answer it, not talked about. So what I'm trying to make is, I think it's more of a machine learning thing, and eventually AI is going to be a reality, to be fair. And the pace that it's going at, and the way the government's pumping money into it, it's going to take over a lot of jobs, I think. And again, I think it's going to make it streamline it, more efficient. I think that's my personal take on it.
It's going to take jobs, I think that's for sure. But these things are hard to predict, aren't they? I mean, I remember, I was especially old with my medieval coding. So there's a point I make actually. I remember when I was very young, and computers were just really coming through into the commercial mainstream, and all the talk then was computers are going to make our life easier. We'll have lots of leisure time because of computers. Yeah. All that's happened since is we worked harder. We work harder now than we did 40 years ago. So they can work through in unpredictable ways, I think.
Because I think government's already thinking about it, because if the jobs are taken, then what's going to happen? Obviously they're trying to balance the risk factor as well, I'm guessing, and that's probably going to be reflected through regulation, I think.
Was there another?
So the question is, is there a ChatGPT proof or AI proof job? Will there be any? Because it looks like AI will cover pretty much 99% of what we do now. So is there any job that you think might not be affected by it?
Yeah, at this point I use my horrible caveat that I'm not a real AI expert, so I don't think I could answer that. But certainly you'd say an awful lot of things look to be at risk, don't they? I mean, particularly when you step up to the other levels of AI that I'm talking about, the general AI and the sort of almost perhaps godlike super AI. That by definition they're able to do things or exceed what the human can do. So yeah, I think you have to say that there are clear issues there.
Is general AI still on a wish list though, or on a science fiction type thing? Because it would have to be just bring AI in and it would know how to do everything.
As I understand it, the line is that it's a wish list. It's not achieved. What's happening behind closed doors in labs, we don't know. But again, the pace of change is so rapid. And I say I'm not an expert on this. From what I understand, though, if it's not achieved yet, I think the indications are it will be achieved pretty quickly.
General AI is really human, isn't it? I mean, because it's all encompassing.
The limit is processing speed. I think the catch-up that we're witnessing now is just the fact that AI has been around for some time, and the processing speeds have just improved exponentially. So now it can be used to do things that look human, but it is not human. It's just a tool, and that's all it is. It might be a fantastic tool, but that's all it is. And as for the jobs, it probably will take a lot of jobs, but I keep harking back when I talk to my son. When I was his age and he's middle university, my job didn't exist. Well, there were some programmers around, but they were all really highly paid, very technical people. The programmers are, I wouldn't say 10 a penny, but they're proliferating that. They're there, aren't they? Like, lots of programmers. I was talking to 8 programmers today, whereas when I started out, I would probably talk to one every 6 months because they just weren't there. So the opportunities will change, the jobs will change. We'll be doing different things, and hopefully more interesting things. I don't like writing copyright for anything. I'm sure writing a patent can be pretty boring at times. So if the gist of it is there already, and you're just filling in the blanks and using your intellectual skill to make it watertight, then yeah, fine, that's great, that's really interesting. But the jobs will change. There will be jobs there, but they'll be different. I don't know what they'll be, but they will be there.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, every time there's a disruptive technology, everybody thinks we're all out of a job. It's Armageddon time. Yeah. It hasn't proved to be the case yet. I don't see that changing. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, it's made me reflect actually on what I do in a working day in my profession, and there's a lot of stuff that really is just grunt work, and typing things out, that sort of thing. Doing stuff that you pretty much do every day, but it's not quite the same. So you haven't got a template. That's exactly the sort of thing that AI will be able to do for you.
In writing a pattern, how much judgment, human judgment, is required And could that ever be replicated by AI?
There's a lot of human judgment required, but but I think it will be replicated. I think the question is at what rate. And if I knew that, I'd probably be able to adjust my retirement plans a bit more precisely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, everybody in professional services, I think, thinks there's some sort of target on their back. In patents, we may be deluding ourselves. We We think in general that it's one of the more difficult skills to have. And so, therefore, the delusion follows thus. You know, if it comes for all professional services, we might be amongst the last to be picked off. Whether that's right or wrong, we don't know. Yeah, there's human skill and judgment, but you know, a lot of it is learned stuff. When you think about it, a lot of it is learned. It's learned stuff plus that you know, indefinable human characteristic of judgment calls.
I think the disadvantage that AI has in comparison to us is common sense. I believe so. That's what it makes us humans.
The least common of all senses. And therefore difficult to achieve.
Ian, sorry, that computer-generated image of you is bothering me.
Yeah, it bothers me as well.
What's going on with that Bressa Cocker?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You're absolutely right. So the devil's in the detail, isn't it? I mean, on a quick scan, often they look fine, and then it doesn't actually, you know, like the court citations don't stand up to any kind of close scrutiny. Yeah, that's right. I mean, look at this weird pocket here. Yeah. And look at all these lines that aren't there in reality.
So ChatGPT failed, or is, as someone said, it's actually in front of the curve rather than? No. I think it's a mistake, isn't it?
Yeah,
it just doesn't know it's a mistake.
It doesn't know.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't know what he looks like. It
It's
knows
got
what
off
the
that
photos are.
Yeah.
It only knows what the photos of him look like. So it's compiling, say, 2,000 images of a jacket.
It's generated something.
It's in different pockets, so it just compiles them as layers and makes its best guess of what that pocket should look like.
Yeah. Yeah.
The eyes are usually, aren't they?
But on the AI
teeth as well, isn't it? Teeth are very difficult. Sorry, it's fakes. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah, please.
I was just going to say, ChatGPT isn't the only one, because I used Google AI this week and it was the best.
Right.
For what I needed, it actually answered the question better.
Right.
I used 3 different ones just as a test.
Right. Yeah.
And it's really interesting.
I think they rushed ChatGPT out.
I mean, it's brilliant.
Google
Like,
furiously.
you know, it's still amazing.
Yeah.
But I wanted a specific answer, and actually with the Google AI,
Yeah.
just stuck it into Google right there.
You were testing it.
Gave me the answer I needed.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to waste hours of my time doing the presentation for tomorrow, which and will be. And I don't really care if they look at it and think that's generated by AI. I don't care at all. Save me hours of my life.
Yeah. As long as you weren't giving
still
away,
answer that
as long as
one.
you weren't giving away critical confidential information,
And
it's probably okay.
It's just a generic question.
Yeah.
The next big change on the horizon is quantum computing, because if you put that with chat with AI, then there's a big threat there, because the processing power then will go just exponentially.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Moore's law continued.
That's the next change.
Yeah, quantum computing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but that's still some way off. I think. Yeah, it's been around for a while.
It's somewhere in the UK, but in other countries are a bit more advanced.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, there was a question incoming there.
You mentioned about the safeguards. March of this year, was it?
Yes, I think the open letter. I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I think ChatGPT launched. Did you say before it was ready or something? And then, and then everybody else.
I think it was very early
to be left behind. So Google and so the safeguards fell by the wayside in terms of grabbing the profits.
Well, I mean, at risk of mission creep and talking about things I'm not really competent to talk about, I'm not sure many of these companies are too concerned about that. I think leave the safeguards for the politicians. I mean, there's a real race, and there's a real spread of risk-taking as well, aren't they?
So I think the question was, is this true that everybody didn't want to be left behind and then launched perhaps before everything was ready, despite the call for the
Well, it certainly started an arms race, yeah, and I think there's a spread of opinion amongst the experts as to what pace people should be going at and whether you should be cautious or less cautious, and I think reading the runes, that's behind what happened to OpenAI, isn't it, recently? It's a lot to do with the attitude to risk, and it may be that the risk takers are in control at the moment. So really, it's like every new development and every new technology. The early days are like the Wild West, and everybody just goes along doing what they want to do. And at some point, and when that point occurs can vary. There'll be some form of regulation or some attempt to rein it in and control it. I think we're just going to see that play out in the next 5 years, my guess.
But if there's we talk about the dark web and all that sort of stuff going on, so, it's going to eventually end up in there, isn't it? That sort of dark side of AI.
Well, that's the concern, isn't it?
Yeah.
That it could design a nuclear weapon or some, lab virus or something like that. Yeah.
No, I think it's more, it impersonates me to phone my man up for a bank detail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. Yes. Yes.
I can impersonate my voice, I can phone my parent up or somebody I know and say, I'm stuck, can you please just give me the bank details to get a taxi or
You never know already.
a hotel room or something, because I'm not stuck.
You never know already.
Well, that's just another variant on all the cybercrime we have already. So that's sort of linear step. Deepfake stuff. Yeah.
Ian, are you picking up any trends in what you're seeing, maybe more specifically around education? About how AI might undermine scholarliness and that kind of stuff? Because I'm just thinking, that the UK's got quite a proud history in that kind of activity, and I'm just thinking there's a lot of scope for that to be undermined, isn't there?
I think that's a huge problem for universities, for example, and schools as well. Absolutely, plagiarism and sorry, not just plagiarism, but using something else and passing it off as your own work. Yeah.
There's quite a bit already. Well, you'll see some universities, because they don't have an answer immediately, are actually stating they won't accept AI-generated work. So they're kind of putting that out there already a little bit to just give themselves a little bit of breathing space before they make. But then there's another argument that people say, well, you need to be better at how you test them, which I don't have an answer for that, but it's an interesting argument, right? Do you know what I mean? Instead of just giving them an essay question that they can just find the answer to in 5 minutes, find another way. So maybe that will all just change.
I just wonder how many years ago universities would have said, you're not allowed to use the internet when that first came and seemed to answer, write essays and stuff.
There is a plagiarism app. I know my son,
they use Turnitin, don't they?
when he writes something, it's at university now, when he writes anything, he puts it through the plagiarism app first, and it tells him essentially to say, yes, it's obviously not.
But the issue here is not plagiarism; it's something that is original. It's just that it's not your original work. It's AI's original work.
I think you just have to accept it. I don't think you'll be able to detect it. Although I must admit, on LinkedIn, if I read something, I can tell. When I read something on LinkedIn, I think that's just AI. In fact, my daughter posted something to say how to detect AI on an illegal document, which is training to be a solicitor. And so I wrote a piece in ChatGPT and posted it in response. And her response was, I knew somebody would do this. So it is a strange thing. But she said, I knew it was generated in ChatGPT. Sometimes you can spot it.
Presumably just going old school and having pen and paper in an examination hall and people walking up and down is probably the best deterrent, I'd have thought, against AI-generated exam answers. I don't know.
So, but the argument then is, if it's okay, what's the problem? I suppose that's the thing.
It actually goes back. By the way, this is great. This session is great.
Think it's okay, but if somebody who's 30 actually doesn't mind, they're not offended by the answer.
Yeah. This is great that it's gone so far above my pay grade, actually, on AI, and we're talking generally. But I think it goes back to your point about, we will adapt, but how that adaptation is, what it will look like, it's hard to predict at the moment, and I think it will change our view of you know, what we are as humans and what we expect to do as humans and how we interact with AI. So it feeds into your point, actually, isn't it? Perhaps, at least in some areas, it will just be accepted that you do it. But perhaps we'll move on and find different areas. I don't know. I think these things are hard to predict.
I don't know, you know.
Innovation,
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Writing an assignment will become a learning experience because they'll be taught by ChatGPT rather than reading the books.
Or a teacher who's awful.
Yeah.
I think we're really having this argument with people for years on different notes because, as you say, it's about how you got there. But for years now I've been arguing with people who do pure photography, digital or chemical, but just photography. And they go on about how they want this great image, but then there's like, all those persons cheated, or my work might not be good because I will do whatever I need to make my finished piece of work 2D or 3D or a sculpture or whatever. I do everything in my power to get my vision out.
Yeah,
So I could use lots of photos, I'll put it through AI, or I use some AI, and I'll just layer everything up till I get the image that I want. People tell me that that's not art, it's not photography, because I've made up this, you know, I've used some photography techniques at the end to print it in an analog way, but it's not photography.
What about
So we've been
Photoshop?
arguing that, yes,
What
exactly.
about Photoshop?
Yeah, I use Photoshop, but I heavily use that, and I might use 20 images in one image and then a load of other stuff. And people tell me that, you know, you can't enter that in a photography competition, or you can't show someone this, or it's cheating. I get out of that.
What about being an architect?
Yeah.
And then you see all these things on Instagram, like perfect buildings. Like,
Oh, there's a lot of those, isn't there? Yeah, this is my perfect holiday cottage with the snow coming down, and you know that that's never existed.
but sometimes you can put it into reality.
Yeah.
So,
You know, Yorkshire Water webpage using images of Herefordshire, I think, comes to mind.
Yeah. That's a bad choice, though, isn't it? With their record.
Right, okay. That just sounds like old-fashioned fraud rather than anything particularly new, but... Okay. Any more for any more? If not, thank you for being such a fantastic audience. Thank you very much indeed.